The next thing you have to have in your lease, I don't care who you are, you have to have this in your lease. So number one, joint and several. If you have more than one occupant, more than one resident, or if you have a co-signer and a tenant that are signing on a lease, you have to have language in there that says that each person is joint and several. What does that mean? George, if we're roommates and we sign a lease together and I fly down to Mexico and say sayonara, I'm not off the hook and you're on the hook for me. You can't tell the landlord, well, Siegel left, here's my 50% of the rent. The landlord's gonna say, sorry, George, you're joint and several. You owe 100% of the rent. Joint and several. If you're a landlord, property owner, you have to have that in your lease. Number two, you have to have a legal fee provision. I'm pretty sure every state requires there to be specific language in your lease document that says what the landlord is entitled to, should the landlord have to commence a legal case to enforce its rights, either to collect money in a non-payment situation or perhaps to get their property back or evict someone where there's something bigger than a non-payment situation happening. But if you have to pay a lawyer to enforce your rights as a property owner, your lease better have a legal fee provision in there that says that you can charge the tenant those legal fees plus court costs and filing costs for your efforts and time and money to then have to go after and enforce your rights. This is a big one, and it's a secret, and no one does it. Your lease needs to require that your tenant maintain certain humidity and temperature levels inside their apartment so that you, as the property owner, as the landlord, can't be held responsible for things like mold that builds up or moisture damage that should occur if the tenant goes away in the summertime and turns off their AC unit, or if the tenant goes away in the wintertime and doesn't leave the heat on and something happens, God forbid, in these older buildings, something freezes, the tenant says, hey, I went to go visit my mom for a month and I come back and my apartment's filled with ice. Well, yeah, because the pipes froze and burst because you didn't leave the heat on. So you got to have that in your lease. You're going to require that the tenant use all the building systems in a typical and reasonable manner, and that they're going to be held liable for any damage to the systems. So what does that mean? I'm going to give you an example. If someone's going to plug in industrial or commercial or professional appliances or tools into your standard wall outlets, there's going to be a problem, and as the property owner, you shouldn't have to pay for that, so make sure you have that in your lease. The next thing you have to have in your lease, I don't care who you are, you have to have this in your lease. No alterations, no modifications, no repairs, no painting allowed by the tenant. Even painting. Here's why. If you permit tenants to paint, who's responsible for repainting when they move out? You are, as the property owner. What does that cost? Well, for me to do a room, it's like $500 a room between labor and materials. I got to put primer on, 2 coats. The other thing that happens is people will say, oh, I thought I could paint. And they'll put a ladder in there. The ladder's now scratching your wood floors. And they'll get up on the ladder and they'll drip paint while they're painting the ceiling or the walls in some crazy thing. They're going to drip paint everywhere. And now you've got paint on your wood floors. It's a mess. Don't allow anybody to do any work. If you have to do work, you do the work. So I don't care what state you're in. If you own multifamily property, your lease documents better require your tenants to report damages, maintenance, and repairs requests to your office immediately. They can't sit on it. The longer they sit on it, the more it festers and grows, and little problems become big problems. So what will happen is, when it comes time for that tenant to vacate and move out, you go do your move-out inspection, you go find 20 things wrong with the apartment, and it comes out of their security deposit. They're going to say to you, oh yeah, well that broke, you guys should have fixed it. Did you tell us about it? Did you ask us to? Go check the maintenance logs. Go check the online portal. I don't see a repairs request from you. You're responsible. So it's going to come back to bite you at some point. You must require the tenant to put you on notice of anything that breaks at any time. So George, it differs from state to state. So you have to know what your state regulations are when coming up with lease terms. But in my markets, in my states, here they are. I love these.